it is difficult to steal. And we cultivate the kind of values in our public service, but in our public officials and in society and in business, where it will be difficult to have corruption at the scale. And I can tell you in Gauteng province, we have introduced a lot of things. I'm glad there are some members of our ethics council who are here. But a lot of reforms in the system. We need a lot of reforms that prevent and that make it impossible for the thief to steal. So I don't know in church what is that. That even the evil person must find it difficult to be evil. You're saving them from themselves. So that we don't build more prisons, but we build more universities. If we focus on catching the thieves, like the Brazilians, we will build a prison for the corrupt. In Brazil, there's a special prison for the corrupt. We will, instead of building a university for the youth, we will build more prisons for the corrupt. So part of so the foundation should, in my view, should lead this. Currently our discourse on corruption is limited to catch the thief. But we're not even effective in the instruments of catching the thief. The institutions of that fighting corruption. And Prof. Sangweni, the elder man, that's why I agree with you that indeed we need to change how public servants are appointed. And that reform should be one of the things that President Ramaphosa should really sign very quickly. As part of the New Dawn. I think the New Dawn, I heard you speak at the funeral passionately about this issue. But it also, you said something at the funeral that the public servants must not only be appointed by the body that is qualified, but they must also be appointed permanent. You didn't make that point yesterday. I was waiting for you to make it. I know that you were shuttled off the stage. But that point, I agree with that point that public servants must be appointed permanent so that they provide stability to the system. But we shouldn't competence is just one part of the problem of our public service. I want to argue that the ethics of our public servants and our public officials must be another thing we can't play down or downplay. Because there are countries, I was saying to someone, there are countries in our continent that has the most competent and most qualified civil servants, but they are corrupt. They are not the most ethical. So young people, I think you were saying here that skills are important, and I think skills are important, so people who are appointed there must be qualified people, competent people, but we must also be obsessed with the ethics of that institution. Now, you know I speak as an insider, outsider. I also know there are very competent civil servants whose ethical and moral grounding is not so good. Competent, but whose ethical and moral grounding is very questionable. So don't think that resolving the issue of appointing the qualified people settles the question. Yes, that's very important and it must not be downplayed, but we've got to emphasize that question of integrity and ethics. And this must also be in our politics. Let me again, as a premier, at the risk of offending my other public officials, I think ethics and integrity must be one of the fundamental things society demands of any politician. Fundamental things. That's why we need lifestyle audits. If you're not willing to subject your own life for the public to know that, why should they entrust you with the most important decisions of our country? So lifestyle audits should be something that we insist find its way in our. So the new dawn, let's define the new dawn bit by bit. And this weekend, you have taken great strides in defining the new dawn bit by bit. And the very last point on the agenda and the area of the new dawn, I want to say that civil society activism, if there's something that has taught us something from the period we have evolved from, I can tell you as the leader of the ANC, if it wasn't civil society mobilization and civil society activism, we would have not emerged from the nightmare we are just emerging from. So sometimes we give too much credence and we invest too much in thinking that the political parties will solve the problems. We need citizen mobilization, civil society activism. So this is the third and the last area I think I want to burden the foundation with. Let's create in the foundation also, I know that it is not the only place, but ongoing dialogue on how we can improve the efficacy of civil society activism. I can tell you, even with the challenges we're facing in Gauteng on every issue, from land to housing, to health, and even we're emerging from the tragedy of life as a demani. If we don't pay attention to the civil society, that government needs to see civil society not as an enemy, but as a partner in development. If we don't shift from demonizing civil society, some of the problems we have had, including life as a demani, if the attitude of government was different, and it's how it saw civil society, we wouldn't have gotten, amongst other things, we wouldn't have gotten where we are. So it is very important, and I would like to say that when we think of the new dawn, let's say that the summaries given by Professor Gumede, that the kind of constitutionalism that we advocate for, and that's transformative constitutionalism, that constitutionalism cannot happen without civil society activism and active citizenry. So it is on this basis that I therefore want to take the opportunity to commend the foundation for the work that you have done this weekend. And I want to also commend all the participants. There were a lot of panelists, there are young people who came here, there are private sector people who were here, but there are also people who were given responsibilities to say something, share ideas, as a very important beginning of a conversation. I know that there's also a bit of frustration, especially from the youth, about talking. It is very much inherent in the youth to be frustrated with things not moving. If the youth lose that, they are no longer youth, they are old. The day they are not impatient with things not happening fast enough, they must know they are old. And they can't be the drivers of change. But I also want to caution that we shouldn't overburden the foundation with the things it is not established to do. And one of those things is that it is creating this platform. I think if we come next year and we want to do to the foundation what you do to us as the government, to say, but what was implemented, we have not achieved inclusion, you are wasting our time. No. I think dialogue is a fundamentally important issue for a country that wants to move from great exclusion to a great transformation. Without that, dialogue alone has value, even before we say what has come out of that. So we shouldn't be impatient with coming together to have a conversation. So I'm making a case for the foundation. I was worried when I listened to how much now you are expected to do things you cannot do. You are a private foundation. You are part of civil society. Government needs to do the things it needs to do, and we in government, Deputy Minister, we must do the things we need to do in government, and we must go back and fix the things that citizens are criticizing and address that. I have no doubt that we need people in government who are committed to this type of change. It's very tempting that we can cross the floor and join civil society. You know, for 3 days when I was criticized the youth, when I left Nasrec, I said to them, maybe it's not worthy of being in government. They said, no, Premier, we need people in government who will do the kind of things we need. Yeah, sometimes it can be very, very frustrating. But we do need change agents in government. And some of those change agents is new blood. It's young people who must be brought in there. So we need a government that listens. That's why you must bring ministers here next year. I think I agree. And by here, I mean to this platform, so we can hear. The more we hear criticism, including new ideas, we will get better governance. So on this note, I really want to thank you, but I also want to say to you, I come from a province of great exclusions. The wealthiest province in the country. The rich exist side by side with large sections of the poor. Wealth exists side by side with significant deprivation. So that province of great exclusions must itself become a province of great inclusions. And we bank also on the work of the foundation to work with us in partnership to change Gauteng into this model of a truly inclusive and transformed space in our economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Premier, for those very motivating and energetic words. We're coming to the end of the program. We are, again, running slightly behind, but I'd like to call on Roger McKay, Ross Katalia, who's a trustee, and also President Motlanthe to come up and start to make the concluding remarks.
All been told to save a few minutes. They say dialogue amongst equals, I should have 30 minutes, but I'll keep it to 5. I should start by saying in conclusion, however, I'm here to gift our presenters and to thank you all on behalf of Champagne Sports and Drakensberg Convention Center. I'd like to mention that in the interest of time, Professor Riddle has said he will run his photographs as we end this for anyone who'd like to watch. It's a pity. He gives a wonderful presentation on the World Heritage Site, but let's watch these beautiful pictures as he does it. I'd also like to note something. We've been welcoming people. I'd also like to welcome our local dignitaries, our Mayor, Deputy Mayor Speaker from Bergville, and in particular, our municipal manager, Caesar Sibanda. Where are you, Caesar? He gave us a clean audit for our little village. I do endorse Professor Stan's Batabeli comments. They were so heartfelt. It's what we were actually all brought up to do. However, this is a case of Tumamina. You were all sent here from far and wide, Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg, throughout South Africa, and we thank you all for honoring us with your presence. And now to the gifting. I've chosen 2 KwaZulu-Natal artists, of course. I've chosen them on the basis that one's almost a neighbor. We go together out into the bush, photograph Ngunis. I love Ngunis. I love their poetic names. Here's an example of them, Amafu, Izindlu. Beautiful poetry. And he hand paints them. There are examples of them. The other artist is my dear departed brother, Graham, who loved nature. and you'll see his prints coming up on the screen. You know, he had Parkinson's, and while he was shaking around, he could still hold a paintbrush, and it was dead still. These minor motor skills are extraordinary things. We were naughty boys, actually. My grandmother had it as well, and we used to say to her, "Granny, when you're writing a check, we'll shake the checkbook, you sign it, it'll come out straight." So I've discussed Johnny de Beer, Graham. As the pictures roll by, you might say, wonder who they should be for. However, I'd like to say how privileged we have been to have you all. And in the interest of time, we're not going to actually give them out, but for our dear Kgalema and Motlanthe and for Nick Benadel, they are the real cows. I know that there are official thanks to follow, but as a sort of boss, I'd like to say to our staff, well done, all of you. Thank you. For the presenters, I'd like to say, we're going to get those prints to you. We'll just need your addresses. We'll follow it up, but that's what they're there for. I'd like to say, travel safely. Do come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roger, and let's again thank him for his extraordinary generosity. When you check out, please, if you would like, and I would encourage you to do so, please make a gratuity for the staff who served us magnificently for these 3 days. Please be generous when you check out. It's now my pleasure to call on Ros Kachalia, who is a trustee of the foundation, and to former President Motlanthe to come up and conclude our conference. Please join me.
Instructions from Comrade Gugu. So we heard from Mervyn that we met at a time of deep crisis in our country. But perhaps it's also a moment of opportunity for us to define our future. This conference has brought together an exceptionally impressive group of South Africans from all walks of life to meet together, to rebuild trust and self-belief in our ability to define that future. So it's important that we have a sense of agency, of active citizenship, of belief in our ability to prevail, especially because we are living through a time of crisis. There were exceptional contributions from all the contributors. I especially loved the young leaders, Shahira Kala. There was young leader, daughter of our National House Speaker, Mrs. Mbete. I saw Ronald Ramola was here last night. So we have an exceptional group of young people, emerging leaders that give us confidence that the country is in good hands. Not to be outdone, we had Professor Sangweni. The older generation wasn't going to allow the young to outdo them. That his impassioned demand for the restoration of values of Batabile in the public service Professor Ben Turok demanding radical economic transformation. So I want to thank all the participants, the contributors, as well as all of you who have traveled to this beautiful part of our country to participate in this dialogue. It's a testament, I think, to the esteem in which President Motlanthe is still held, that so many of you, such a diverse group, accepted our invitation to participate in this dialogue. Google has indicated to me that I should communicate to you that we want to continue this dialogue, that we should think about this as a sort of mini Davos, or perhaps an alternative Davos. Let me just take this opportunity to disabuse you of a rumor that we are planning to invite President Trump to the next Davos, alternative Davos, or in the Drakensberg. But he indicated that our demand that he agreed to immediate, verifiable denuclearization and fair trade with South Africa was not acceptable, especially when we indicated that he should include the EU. So that was the deal breaker. Let me mention the people and who contributed to this event, who must be specifically thanked. First of all, the steering committee, Dr. Nick Bernadelle, Professor William Gumede, Dr. Kulu Mbata, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, Mr. James Lakoma, Rolf Meyer, Mr. Motlanthe, Mr. Miles Nzama, Mr. Roger McKay, Ms. Hava Bibi Khan, Mr. Kugan Pillay, and of course, Gugu Motlanthe. The funders, the McKay family and the West family, the foundation, the Ichi-Kovitz Family Foundation, the European Union, Harris Partners, Mr. Miles Nzama, and IQ Business. We want to thank the staff of the Office of the President, who work without salary, but I'm sure have other other rewards for having to be able to work with you, Mr. President. The European Union for covering the costs of 4 people who assisted with the administrative work. Obviously, the presenters and panelists that I've already thanked. And then, of course, the trustees, Mr. James Nkoma, Oscar van Heerden, Gugu. Okay, that's enough. The trustees. And it remains for me to wish you all well. Hamagahle, and hope to see you all next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Firoz Kgalema. One of the complicating factors of life, particularly where there's an organization, is protocol. Protocol is a very difficult, comrade, I must tell you, because comrade, protocol used to give Madiba lots of trouble. Madiba was a stickler for punctuality. So if a meeting is to start at 9, he will be ready, seated at 5 to 9 to proceed with the meeting. And of course, protocol people will come to him and say, no, Tata, please wait. The people are not yet seated, and so on. And his response or retort was always to say to them, well, if I don't take my seat and I roll into the meeting venue later, they are going to assume that I'm the cause of the delay. And he would barge into the meeting and take his seat. And of course, he would be, as people arrive later, he would be noting their names on a small piece of paper on the side. And at the opportune moment, he will apologize profusely to them for having started the meeting before their arrival. And it always had a positive impact in terms of observing punctuality. Mine really is to thank all of you for availing yourself to participate in this inaugural Inclusive Growth Forum. We, as a foundation, have been given lots of homework. So we will go back and sift through all the suggestions. And we hope that by Tuesday, all the available papers that were delivered here can be posted on our website so that they become accessible to the general public. But over and above that, we intend to put together a comprehensive report that would become a public document of all the wonderful and positive suggestions that were made during the course of these 3 days. The Statistician General, Date Padile Wotla, by force of example, has taught us that those of us who had the privilege of occupying public office and were exposed to very clear constraints of what can be done, have the privilege now to make very concrete suggestions of how to undo the mess that we created when we were in office. Because you heard his wonderful presentation here. It's not a new discovery. He always knew what he said here when he was in office. But the mandate of his office had the effect of constraining him because it was limited to gathering data. Now he always shared the data with the nation as a whole and the colleagues in government. And of course, like everybody else, he ended up frustrated that this wealth of information was not being in other words, was not being utilized optimally. And so now that he's out of that office, he can do now the proper, give guidance on how this information should be utilized. So it's a lesson in how we should utilize experience that we gathered through exposure and responsibility of being in office, so that life should not end when you step out of office. So the protocol demands that I start off by acknowledging Premier Makura and Mrs. Makura, Honorable Deputy Minister Gungubele and Mrs. Gungubele, our veterans, Tate Mlangeni, Professor Ben Turok, Mary Turok, Professor Sangweni, and of course all the young people who joined us in this hall. It was important to have an intergenerational mix of South Africans to wrap their heads around the key questions. I think next time we will try and narrow the issues that we need to focus on, rather than to have a long list, because I realized that the time was our worst enemy, because many people who would have loved to share their perspectives and suggestions with us were unable to do so. But we encourage you to even drop us a line if you get a brainwave about what needs to be done, so that we can share the suggestions with our leaders who are in government. Premier Makura has indicated to you how frustrating it is for trying your best, your level best, and you still get feedback which is honest. Honest feedback is really meant to strengthen what you're doing. It's not meant to frustrate you, because we still need people who can ascend to public office and provide us with leadership. And so that feedback, I call it feedback rather than criticism. It's really just feedback that, Steve Tshwete, the late Steve Tshwete, Minister Steve Tshwete, used to say that, what is the point of praising a fish for knowing how to swim? So if you are in office, the expectation is that that's your work, that's your duty, and you must perform it to the best of your ability, and without expecting to be praised for that. Now, our people in the communities that feel marginalized and excluded, right from the young ones, must find the space to voice their feelings that they are marginalized or they are excluded. It is very important. Otherwise, if they don't give us honest feedback, if they don't give those in public office honest feedback, then of course, the leadership will become complacent, and complacency is a weakness that shouldn't be countenanced. I'm elated and really heartened by the wonderful young people who were present during the course of these 3 days. Most of them very capable people and with sharp minds. And so, you know, the fourth industrial revolution is something that appears to be torture for the older generation, because firstly, the manuals of these gadgets are written in very small print. So there's difficulty in reading and understanding how to, you know, work out these complicated gadgets. So when you have grandchildren and children, you give it to them, and they crack it within a few minutes and give it back to you and show you all the applications without reading the manual. So, so one of the great points that emerged from the discussions around this fourth industrial revolution is that actually we should start at ECD level by ensuring that these little toddlers have, you know, access to these gadgets, because they are not constrained by training. They have no boundaries, and so they can be creative and innovative and even expand on what needs to be invented and so on. I've seen an advert on television where young people speak about what they want to do. And one of them says she wants to, in future, create a machine that would renew old houses. And another one says she wants to create a machine that would take all the refuse and dirt underground, and so on. So you can see that, you know, their minds are, you know, searching for solutions to what they can see around them and what they can experience. So rather than waiting for those who become experts, we should also include, this was a suggestion, young ones from ECD level. Now, Professor Kgalema Motlanthe spoke about corruption of money and corruption of values. And he said we are preoccupied with addressing the problem of corruption of money to the exclusion of dealing with the problem of values. Because values are important in society. If we are not a value-based society, then since we are gathering here on a Sunday morning, Bishop Pumlwana, then people will live by the 11th commandment. And of course, once the 11th commandment is adhered to, the rest of the other 10 really don't matter. And the 11th commandment says, thou shalt not be caught. And I want to leave you with a quote from a letter that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote from Alabama prison to a governor. It's a long letter, but I'll just refer to the very last sentence in it. And he says to this governor, when you are involved in a continuous fight against a degenerating feeling of nobodiness, you will understand why we are not prepared to wait. So, many of our people are involved in this continuous degenerating fight against the feeling of nobodiness. And that's why they are not prepared to wait. They need their issues to be addressed forthwith. And that's what we must understand as public personalities. We must understand that you can't say to those who are without that, please wait, we've established a special committee to look into this matter. And next year we come back and say, well, that committee has now developed a framework. And the next year we come back and say, now the committee is being augmented by 3 other members. Doesn't work. It can only generate frustration. And that's why we must try and understand and seek to give prompt responses. My last task before I step off this podium is really to convey our special thanks to Roger and Steve and James, but most importantly also to the captain of the staff who looked after us over the 3 days. And who were involved, in charge of the logistics. Philip West and Bianca Ailiff, as well as Adim and Vanessa and Donovan, all of them, including Colin, who was in charge of all the electronic gadgets here, the speakers and the screens. We thank you most sincerely. And in our vernacular isiXhosa, we say to you, Nangomso, Ningadinwa. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the conference. For those of you who will stay for lunch, I know another delicious meal will be available. For those of you on the buses, the 2 buses will be outside the reception. 1 hour from now, we'll make it 1:15, so you can check out and have a meal. And can I add my thanks? Thank you for all your support with the challenge of holding the timing together. And we hope you drive safely, and we hope to see many of you soon. Thank you very, very much indeed.
I went to the